At my sister's graduation party, my dad gave a toast and said, "Nothing's too expensive for my son. That's why I took out a loan in your name." Everyone laughed like it was a joke, but when I checked my credit report that night, it wasn't. And the next morning, I was standing in a bank lobby with a printout while my family group chat begged me not to press charges. I, 32M, walked into my sister's graduation party that Saturday evening expecting nothing more than overcooked barbecue and awkward small talk with distant relatives. My sister had just finished her master's degree in accounting, and the whole family had gathered at my parents' house to celebrate. The backyard was decorated with balloons and a banner that read, "Congratulations, graduate," in gold letters. Dad stood up near the dessert table, tapping his beer bottle with a fork to get everyone's attention. The conversations died down as about 30 family members and friends turned toward him. He cleared his throat and launched into what I assumed would be his typical sentimental speech about hard work and determination. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. Dad raised his beer and grinned at the crowd, telling everyone that nothing was too expensive for his son, which was why he had taken out a loan in my name. The entire backyard erupted in laughter. My aunts were giggling, my cousins were slapping their knees, and even my sister was covering her mouth, trying not to laugh too hard. I forced a smile and raised my own beer, playing along like everyone else. Inside, though, something felt wrong. Dad had this look in his eyes that I recognized from childhood. The same expression he wore when he told us Santa wasn't coming because we hadn't been good enough, right before revealing our hidden presents. The party continued around me, but I couldn't focus on anything else. People kept coming up to me, patting my back and making jokes about family loans and credit scores. I nodded and laughed at the right moments, but my mind was racing. Why would Dad make a joke like that? And why did it feel so specific? By the time I got home that night, the uneasiness had transformed into genuine concern. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, logging into my credit monitoring account for the first time in months. I had always been careful with my finances, paying off my credit cards in full each month and checking my score regularly, but I had gotten lazy about monitoring it recently. The page loaded, and my heart stopped. There it was, clear as day. A personal loan for $47,000, opened 6 months ago. The lender was a company I had never heard of, and the account showed regular monthly payments being made. My credit score had actually improved because of the on-time payments, which explained why I hadn't received any alerts. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, refreshing the page multiple times, hoping it was some kind of error. But the loan remained there, along with my name, my social security number, and my address. Someone had taken out a loan in my name, and based on Dad's toast, I had a pretty good idea who. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours researching identity theft laws and printing out documentation from every credit bureau. The loan details showed that the money had been deposited into an account I didn't recognize, and the monthly payments were being made from a different account entirely. At 7 in the morning, I called the bank's fraud department. The representative was sympathetic but explained that I would need to file a police report and dispute the loan formally. She walked me through the process and scheduled an appointment for me to come in with all my documentation. Before heading to the bank, I decided to call Dad directly. I needed to hear him explain what I had discovered, needed to give him a chance to make this right before involving the police. Dad answered on the third ring, sounding surprisingly awake for someone who had been drinking the night before. I asked him directly about the loan, about whether his toast had been more than just a joke. There was a long pause before he responded. He told me he had been planning to explain everything after the party, that he hadn't expected me to check my credit so quickly. The tone in his voice was different now, defensive and slightly panicked. He explained that he had needed money for some business investments and that his own credit wasn't good enough to qualify for the amount he needed. I asked him how he had gotten my personal information, and he reminded me that he had helped me with my taxes a few years ago. He still had copies of all my documents, including my social security card and bank statements. He assured me that he had been making all the payments on time and that I wouldn't be hurt by it. The casual way he explained it made me angrier than the theft itself. He talked about it like he had borrowed my car without asking, not committed a federal crime. I told him he had 24 hours to figure out how to transfer the loan into his own name or pay it off completely. Dad's tone shifted then, becoming the voice I remembered from childhood when I had disappointed him. He reminded me that family helped family, that he had supported me through college and had never asked for anything in return. He He said I was being dramatic and that no real harm had been done. I hung up without saying goodbye and drove straight to the bank. The fraud specialist at the bank was a woman in her 50s who had clearly handled cases like this before. She reviewed all my documentation and confirmed that I was a victim of identity theft. She explained that even though the person making the payments was related to me, it was still a crime, and I had every right to dispute the loan. She helped me file the formal dispute and explained that the process would likely take several weeks. In the meantime, she recommended that I place a fraud alert on my credit reports and consider freezing my credit to prevent any additional unauthorized accounts from being opened. As I was finishing up the paperwork, my phone started buzzing with notifications from our family group chat. Apparently, Dad had called my mom, who had called my sister, who had started a chain reaction of family panic. The messages started innocuously enough. Mom asked if I was okay and whether I wanted to talk about whatever was bothering me. My sister chimed in saying Dad seemed upset about something and wondering if we had gotten into an argument. But as the morning progressed, the messages became more desperate. Dad must have told them what was happening because suddenly everyone was messaging at once. Mom was pleading with me to think about what I was doing to the family. My sister was asking if I really wanted to destroy Dad's life over money. Even my grandmother, who rarely used her phone, had somehow sent a message asking me to call her. I ignored the group chat and drove home, but the messages kept coming. Extended family members I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly reaching out, asking me to reconsider whatever I was planning to do. The narrative being spread through the family grapevine was that I was overreacting to a family misunderstanding and about to destroy Dad's life out of spite. By noon, my driveway was full of cars. Mom, my sister, 2 of my aunts, and my uncle were all sitting on my front porch waiting for me. They had apparently held an emergency family meeting and decided to stage an intervention. I parked in the street and walked up to face them. Mom immediately started crying, asking me why I was being so cruel. She explained that Dad had made a mistake, but that he was trying to fix it, and involving the police would ruin everything. My sister was more direct. She accused me of being vindictive and selfish, pointing out that Dad had never missed a payment and that my credit score had actually benefited from the loan. She said I was trying to punish him for something that hadn't actually hurt me. My uncle, who had always been Dad's closest friend, tried a different approach. He talked about family loyalty and forgiveness, about how good parents sometimes made bad decisions, but that didn't make them bad people. He offered to help Dad pay off the loan if I would just drop the dispute and forget about involving the police. But my aunt, who worked in banking, surprised everyone by taking my side. She explained to the group that what Dad had done was serious fraud, regardless of his intentions or ability to make payments. She pointed out that I could be held liable for the debt if anything went wrong, and that Dad could potentially take out additional loans in my name at any time. The argument on my front porch lasted for over an hour. Everyone was talking at once, voices raised, neighbors starting to stare. Finally, I told them all to leave. I explained that I had already filed the dispute and that the process was out of my hands now. That evening, Dad showed up at my door alone. He looked older than I had ever seen him, his face drawn and his shoulders slumped. He asked if we could talk privately, and despite everything, I let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I had discovered the fraud the night before. Dad started by apologizing, but not in the way I had expected. He wasn't sorry for taking out the loan. He was sorry for getting caught, sorry for not handling the revelation better. He explained that the business investment had gone bad, that he was struggling to make the loan payments, and that he had been planning to tell me everything once he figured out how to fix the situation. He said the toast at the party had been his way of testing the waters, seeing how I would react to the idea. I asked him how he could have thought this was acceptable, how he could have risked my financial future without even asking. Dad got defensive again, reminding me of all the sacrifices he had made for our family, all the times he had put his children's needs before his own. But then he said something that changed everything. He told me that this wasn't the first time he had used my information. 3 years ago, he had opened a credit card in my name to pay for my sister's wedding expenses. He had paid it off and closed it before I noticed, but he had kept all my documents just in case he needed them again. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had been wondering how my credit score had jumped so significantly a few years back, assuming it was just the result of consistent payments and low utilization. But Dad had been secretly managing my credit, using my identity as his personal financial backup plan. I told him he had to leave, that I needed time to process everything. Dad pleaded with me to reconsider filing the police report, offering to sign over the title to his truck as collateral for the loan. But the damage was done. The trust was completely broken. Update 1. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. The bank's fraud department had escalated my case to their investigation team, and I had an appointment with a detective at the local police station. The family group chat had gone silent, but I was receiving individual messages from various relatives asking me to reconsider. My sister called me directly, crying and begging me to think about what this would do to Dad's reputation in the community. She reminded me that he was a deacon at our church and that a fraud conviction would destroy his standing there. She offered to take over the loan payments herself if I would just drop the charges. But I had done more research into identity theft laws, and what I learned made me even more determined to see this through. Not only was Dad liable for criminal charges, but I could potentially be held responsible for the debt if the dispute process didn't go in my favor. The loan was in my name, and if Dad stopped making payments or defaulted, it would be my credit and my financial future on the line. I met with Detective Rodriguez on Thursday morning. She was a specialist in financial crimes and explained that identity theft by family members was more common than most people realized. She said that many victims chose not to press charges, which only enabled the perpetrators to continue the behavior with other family members. The detective walked me through the process of filing a formal complaint. She explained that the district attorney's office would ultimately decide whether to pursue charges, but that my cooperation would be essential for building a case. She also warned me that family fraud cases were often emotionally difficult because they tended to divide families permanently. I signed the complaint that afternoon. Update 2. Dad was arrested the following Tuesday. I wasn't there, but my sister called me immediately afterward, screaming and crying and blaming me for destroying the family. She told me that Dad had been handcuffed at his workplace, in front of all his colleagues, and that Mom had suffered what she described as a nervous breakdown. The arrest made the local newspaper, a small item in the crime blotter that identified Dad by name and listed the charges: identity theft and fraud. Our church community was buzzing with gossip, and several family friends called my mom to express their shock and support. I felt sick reading the article, seeing Dad's name in print associated with criminal charges. But I also felt vindicated. The detective had discovered 2 additional credit cards that Dad had opened in my name over the past 5 years, both of which had been paid off and closed before I noticed them. The pattern of behavior was clear and documented. Dad's attorney contacted me through my own lawyer, offering to work out a restitution agreement that would avoid trial. The proposal included full repayment of the loan, coverage of all my legal fees, and a written guarantee that Dad would never access my personal information again. It was tempting, but my attorney advised against it. She explained that accepting restitution without Dad pleading guilty to the charges would leave me vulnerable if he decided to repeat the behavior in the future. She recommended that any agreement include a guilty plea and probation, which would create a legal record of the crime. Update 3. The family dynamics completely shifted after Dad's arrest. Mom initially refused to speak to me, blaming me for what she called the destruction of our family. But after talking to Dad's attorney and understanding the full scope of his actions, her anger began to redirect toward him. My sister remained loyal to Dad, but even she started to waver when the investigation revealed that he had also opened a small loan in her name 2 years earlier to pay for some home repairs. She had been completely unaware, just as I had been. The church asked Dad to step down from his position as deacon pending the resolution of the criminal charges. Many of the congregation members were supportive, viewing him as a good man who had made a mistake. But others were less forgiving, particularly those who had entrusted him with church finances over the years. 3 months after the arrest, Dad's attorney approached mine with a revised plea agreement. Dad would plead guilty to 1 count of identity theft, serve 2 years of probation, pay full restitution including legal fees, and attend financial counseling. In exchange, the more serious fraud charges would be dropped. I accepted the agreement, not because I had forgiven Dad, but because I wanted to move forward with my life. The legal process had been exhausting, and the family drama had taken a toll on my mental health. Dad was sentenced on a Tuesday in November. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom while he stood before the judge and formally admitted his guilt. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the months of legal proceedings and family turmoil. The judge was surprisingly compassionate, noting that this was Dad's first offense and that he had shown genuine remorse for his actions. But she also emphasized the seriousness of identity theft, particularly when it involved family members who trusted the perpetrator with their personal information. After the sentencing, Dad approached me in the courthouse hallway. He apologized again, but this time it felt different. He didn't make excuses or try to justify his actions. He simply said he was sorry for violating my trust and for putting me in an impossible situation. I accepted his apology, but made it clear that our relationship would never be the same. Trust, once broken so completely, couldn't be rebuilt with words alone. The loan was transferred into Dad's name as part of the restitution agreement, and my credit report was cleaned up within 6 months. My credit score actually improved once the unauthorized accounts were removed and the dispute was resolved in my favor. The family slowly began to heal, though the dynamics remained forever changed. Mom and I rebuilt our relationship gradually, bonding over our shared experience of Dad's betrayal. My sister took longer to come around, but eventually acknowledged that I had done the right thing by protecting myself. Dad completed his probation successfully and maintained steady employment despite the conviction on his record. We see each other at family gatherings now, maintaining a cordial but distant relationship. The easy trust and unconditional love of a father-son relationship was replaced by something more cautious and conditional. Looking back, I don't regret my decision to press charges. Dad's actions weren't a momentary lapse in judgment. They were part of a pattern of financial deception that had been going on for years. By holding him accountable, I not only protected my own financial future, but potentially prevented him from victimizing other family members. The experience taught me that family loyalty has limits, and that love doesn't require accepting abuse or criminal behavior. Sometimes protecting yourself means making choices that feel like betrayal to others, but that doesn't make those choices wrong. Dad's toast that night was meant to be a joke, a way to test the waters before revealing his deception. Instead, it became the moment that exposed years of fraud and forever changed our family. In trying to protect his secret, he had revealed it in the worst possible way.